Mm. Hey, 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 morning. Hey, so it's about 5 a.m. I've been up for about an hour or so. Uh, Long day yesterday. Just barely, last night, I guess, realized that after I got shit-faced drunk, I made a video and passed out, just barking at how slovenly I thought the amazing atheist was as a personality. Even though I think there's something kind of just civil and middle of the road about the guy that's actually really positive. Trying to find the virtues of somebody is interesting, especially when the person gets traction. It makes you wonder, well, why do they have traction? I'm not subscribed to PewDiePie. The guy obviously gets a shitload of traction. Like the most, man. Um, I was just thinking about how language can really go anywhere, and uh, meaning it attempts to go anywhere. But so I guess I was listening to, I don't know, people's DMT experiences, and they're just these algorithms, and here's these other voices, and here's these other things that are controlling the matrix about you, right? And I had gone through what seemed like one redeeming factor of my um, life, I suppose, is that I stuck around long enough to see myself move through paradigmatic shifts into other realms of thinking and engaging all sorts of different personalities. Some, I mean, very, very mythic personalities, very, very dangerous personalities, I believe. And yet, um, I don't know, holding my own, positioning myself through it, getting through time. It's very interesting, right? So, and I got onto YouTube's a long time ago, about the same time the Amazing Atheist did. I think he got on right when it started, though. I think it was about 2005, where I got on in like 2007. Um, anyway, so he might have just had traction out of that depth, also, as a pioneer. Not to speculate on that. What I was going to talk about was meeting amendum a little bit in terms of what antinatalist philosophy did for me in terms of buttressing uh, my adult life as it became defunct as a fully educated adult. Because I was the most precocious or lucky, and/or lucky, and studious, studious of humankind, studious of human nature, able to mimic things and mock things, and really got into mimicking for a while, but taking it to a very high level, because kind of like mimicking a juggler is part of learning how to juggle, right? Mimicking a unicyclist, like, hey, why are they pedaling backward, right? When their body's moving backward, right? Like at what point in the arch of their body is it that they're compensating for, and then trying to like parallel the size of their body and the position of their body and the angles of their knees on X unicycle, so forth, and then projecting that onto my own body, height, weight, because I'm a tall guy, and I never was actually very proficient on the unicycle. But I did okay. Like I mostly in forward movement, not a lot of backing up tricks, and knees complicated the ride, so I didn't do it for extended periods of time. I think my maximum was probably only a minute and a half, not even up to maybe up to 3 minutes, but probably not up to 3 minutes. Anyway, so I forget about that history. But anyway, but I do juggle. I do some juggling, but not like 5 or 7 balls, just 4 balls, 3 balls, like rings, knives. I was juggling knives. But anyway, and so antinatalism function as a means to cradle a failure to procreate. I also, when I was younger, in my early 20s, I think at the age of 20, I had gotten my girlfriend, whom I was going out with in high school, and then broke up, and then we had just gotten back together, and she got pregnant, and I was a bit reserved at the idea of having kids, right? Meaning that the idea of an abortion wasn't what I was promoting, but I didn't act especially excited. I said I didn't feel like I was ready for a child, like for a kid, right? But I wasn't saying like go do this. But nonetheless, she went and did it. And so I was complicit in not being um, discouraging. Like I don't know, I wasn't discouraging of her doing it at the time. Plus, at that time, I was, I don't know, secularly atheist, and human content, or the idea of child's in utero, I guess, was, um, the considerations of internal pain, I guess. Meaning, even though I broke a lot of bones and had a lot of internal pain growing up, I guess I hadn't fully identified with the idea of other people's pain, right? Like ethics, in terms of what happens to me happens to the other, in more than just mental holographic conveyance of information via language. But nonetheless, it can, meaning to the extent that you follow what it is I'm laying down, or you're picking up bits of what I'm saying, I'm conveying some sort of information. And because of that, um, I don't know, it's interesting to both tell the stories, but it's interesting to also wonder whether or not, kind of like in the case of the abortion, I'm by not discouraging something, other people might assume that I'm endorsing it. Anyway, by the time the second abortion had come around, I was definitely not endorsing it. I was doing everything to encourage otherwise, and even racing lately into another state out of uh, yeah, I don't know. I was racing from California to Utah to a doctor's office, and I always felt guilty because I got there just um, beyond what I believe was beyond too late, and the doctor concurred. Like, no, the first half's already happened. The second half happens later, which then made me wonder, like, what am I believing about what the doctor's saying? Um, meaning, I'm wondering what I could have done more to have stopped the abortion. And I blame myself because I was living in Los Angeles and I had sold 2 paintings to a guy, and I needed to get back to Utah, and I knew that she had a doctor's appointment, but the way she was phrasing doctor's appointment, she wasn't letting on that it was an abortion doctor until later on. But nonetheless, this guy had owed me debt on two paintings, and I had the notion based on what she was saying between the two times of her pregnancies about how she loved our daughter, right, our blonde daughter, um, and um, and I said, well, why do you think it was a daughter? Why do you think it'd be blonde? She said eventually, like, because it's what I imagined our first child to be. And I said, oh, or our child to be that child. Right? She didn't use the word first because when we were talking about it, we weren't projecting a second. So this was an intermediate time between us going out that we met and talked. And she lamented heavily the first abortion, as did I in one way, but I couldn't commit to her. And then I also ended up breaking up with another girlfriend and leaving Utah altogether to move to LA. And hence, I had cycled back to LA in a motorhome later on, and then got a hold of her in Utah, but I was still based in Los Angeles. Anyway, so the point is, though, is I had sold these two paintings, and I hadn't collected on it, and I knew there was a doctor's appointment the next day in Utah, and it's roughly a 14-hour drive. But I wasn't slowed down in my mind by the process, but I had eventually guilted myself that had I just not tried to collect on these two paintings and not sold the art, somehow I would have got to the doctor's office in time, and I may have got to the doctor's office in time to stop the first chemical pill of the abortion. Anyway, nonetheless, I was too late. I won't go into the drama of how it is we completed the second, and I say we completed the second taking of the pill, and going through almost a karmic damning of the first. Seemed as if it was happening. And anyway, all I know is I have a lot of contextual baggage. Everybody's got a lot of contextual baggage with their life. And so certain spiritual freedoms later on free you of your baggage. You can look at it again. It is interesting to look at it and analyze it and repress something upon myself that's no longer pressed. Well, and it is interesting to write about contradiction, right? Because I'm both like conveying information that's true, and yet it's released, and I'm reapproaching it and reassessing its time when it was serious. So it almost to re-empathize with, kind of like being, if you could freeze your blood in your veins and then erase your veins and just have this like model of the blood in your veins, like the notion that spiritually you can be released from the veins, but then trying to re-empathize with the veiny history when I was locked in the veins was very interesting. It was a very interesting metaphor, right? Which, anyway, so I guess what I was saying was that the virtue of this video was to speak about the virtue of still being alive after what seemingly is a lot of collateral damage, and then wanting or feeling like I can make the stone stop rolling down the hill and maybe turn it into a creature that can climb up a hill again. And I did, I guess, for a bit. And some things required whole different modalities of diet and intoxication. And then spiritual, what was it? It was conflicting because at one point, even after born againness, then you go through your guilts, before God the Father, so to speak, the all-seeing panoptic eye, and the God of the Old Testament, the Bible, the God-fearing God. And your life is basically threatened. Your soul becomes threatened even more if you recriminate, re-sin, re-trespass. It was weird. I was in the park and this guy's dog had thrown up, and then we knew the dog was going to eat its own barf because its barf was like fairly fresh dog food. It was in front of this lady's stand, and I offered to help her move her stand, but she wanted her stand right there, and it appeared that it was out of principle. And I said, "Well, that dog's going to eat that barf again." I kind of jokingly said it, as opposed to, when I was saying, "Well, we can just move your table, and you don't need to," like implying, like, "Hey, you don't need to let that dog eat its barf." But that dog is more than willing to eat its own barf. And sure enough, later on, I'm almost, yes, I saw the dog eating from that pile, and then I saw the guy washing the space with a gallon of water. And I think she may, yeah, she didn't move her table. She didn't move her table. Someone else moved next to her table, changing the composition a little bit. And the sun was pretty hot, so I'm certain the area dried up a bit. And she seemingly had amazing sales that day. But the biblical idea of going back to one's barf and eating it is a type of recrimination of the soul post, like the now go forth and sin no more. Right? Like be on with you, and fly your soul where you must. Right? And do so with the lightest of eases. Right? If you're self-burdened, then you're in your own way, and that's something you haven't dealt with about your past, I believe. Anyway, which corridor to shoot down here? Antinatalism. Oh, so anyway, after these abortions, whereby 5 years later, after parting from her and dealing with a lot of the consequences that were occurring in my lack of career involvement because of another poor decision on my part, but not withstanding the context of another particular influential human being that I had entrusted, a good friend, and I had overstepped my trust for him. His needs I put before mine at a crucial point that I shouldn't have done so, because A, I couldn't have known the complexity of his needs, and B, I had a lot I guess I had a lot of positive on the line for my life, but I chose to forego that, partially also on something that he said about, hey, if you can get a game making job here, you can certainly get a game making job up in the computer capital of the world, right? So he was both making a statement of like my luck, my environment, and my capabilities. And what I realized was that I was precisely in the right place at the right time, and I was offered the right job. The job, though, unfortunately, did not start at the right time for me. It was, I was in, I believe, July when I was hired, and I wasn't to start until, I think, November. For 40K a year, they would teach me how to make video games. And I forgo that game making job to help this guy with his sister's custody battle against somebody the dad, who was quite um, particular about the way he was managing the wife during her pregnancy, like not letting her go to the bathroom, lecturing her for hours. She was shitting in her, pissing on herself and shitting on herself, and the guy would scorn her. And then after the birth, that's when I met the guy. But and he did seem peculiarly intelligent, not unintelligent, unread individual, but seemingly became quite manipulative about the way that he would insist his daughter be raised, such as a vegan, be um, not coddled from the cradle, meaning if the baby was crying, if you could look at the baby and see that there was nothing wrong for the baby, and the baby showed no signs, I guess, of neglect, you let the baby cry it out. You don't pick up the baby, right? And so this narrative ran a line of anti-intuitive notions, and my buddy had framed this. Um, because the guy was learning this, he was very studious. This was his first child, but he wasn't married to her, and she wasn't married. And anyway, this was up in Bellingham, Washington, where this was taking place, right? And so it was a pretty serious case, and they were seemingly losing because the his sister. Um, well, that's a follow up story to it all, where eventually she ended up kidnapping the kid, her own kid, and raising the kid in custody while more court proceedings carried on. Anyway, I was asked up there for moral support, but contradictorily, I also assumed that things might become like that. I was being called up there for um, physical pressure, if you will, support. And um, anyway, point is I ended up hijacking my own career on behalf of the interests of somebody else, and I guess the controlling nature that his sister felt um, within this guy's household, even though they were in a neighborhood, right, where I guess neighbors could hear you yell. There were police that were available. Still, this, I don't know. And his family household is very introverted, and they came from a small town, and his mom was German, and his dad was an American truck driver that met her, I guess, in, I don't know, like, would be the Korean conflict. I don't know. I don't remember enough of his dad's history. I'm just trying to figure out his dad's age, because I thought, well, he seemed too young for World War II, but and then I was thinking, well, why not the Korean conflict? And I thought, well, why not Vietnam? Um, as my uncle, he went to Vietnam. My dad, he didn't. My dad was stationed in Japan. And so, anyway, maybe this story was Vietnam, but this guy was in Germany, I do believe. Anyway, and that's the story of, well, not the story, but some background on the nature of this family household that was peculiar, raising these two kids, one of which was the daughter who was had the child and so forth, and the other was my friend. Was my friend. He wanted to show no um, accountability for his words, not words barrenly barked out. Have at it. Words that are metaphor that show something, like the Amazing Atheist words have a tone to them, a quality that in and of itself has a certain type of value or type of echo, or it's generated something. Um, and I don't mean that as like a future rhetorical argument for being back again, recriminating off of a type of spiritual wagon towards sobriety, right? But I did fall off, And like this one guy, he was talking about the machine people, right? Almost like alien algorithms that are changing every aspect of your universe because your universe seemingly will continue to unfold and that you'll perfectly form a fit to your universe. Unless, of course, there's a breach, which I think some people witness from time to time, and sometimes there's inclusion. If you ever do claim to see, you know, more than naturally explainable or to your greatest knowledge and understanding a breach in the reality, that's another type of weird violation. All that happened post love, post this event, post abortions, post this event, post and during a relationship with the woman who I always thought I probably most definitely should have married, and that was Carrie. But I didn't even do that because I had double stacked, right? I had already not fallen downhill. I had fallen down twice, and I was the dog that went back at least twice to eat its own vomit. Like, hey, that dog didn't just throw up and eat its own vomit. It then drank some water and re-threw up its vomit, and then it re-ate its vomit. Like it's a recrimination of the recrimination. It's like a Mandelbrot set geometrically laid out in reverse. You're falling away from it. You're not entering it, right? You're not falling into the depths. And some people are more amazed when they feel like they're flying up as opposed to falling down to. And it just seems as if it's an ongoing infinite set of datum. And it is interesting to have broken as many bones as I had as a child and been as precarious as I was and gotten into the situations that I was into and feeling quite. I used to make a joke like, "Oh, I'm either gifted." They'd had this something in my elementary school called the gifted and talented program, right? And later on, I was trying to come up with something kind of comedic about it because somebody mentioned about it, and so and my parents were okay financially. I mean, we were middle class, and I felt pretty good about it. Even though, like, if I compared going to high school, like I was Molly Ringwald and Pretty in Pink, like I was from the poorer side of town going to the richer side of town for school, right? Or maybe I was more like Ducky. Dun, 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 dun. And here she goes. Try a little, try a little down the us. Yeah, yeah. Gotta, you gotta know what to do. You gotta take this advice. You gotta please never leave. Got to hold. Got, got, got to try a little tenderness. Yeah, yeah. You got to know what to do. Yeah, take this advice. You got to squeeze her. You never leave her. Oh no, you got to, not tenderness. Yeah, yeah. You gotta know what to do. Yeah, take this advice. Squeeze her. Give her. Never leave her. Anyway, so Carrie, she had made the comment to me. One of our rule systems was, yes, Mike, you can sleep with all of your ex girlfriends. No new women, but all of your ex girlfriends. Yes, you may do that. And I did do that. And her rule was, um, I'm okay with that, but you can never break up with me. Meaning, you cannot criminate and recriminate with me. And this was had developed into almost a hallmark of my character to have made enough mistimed steps or misappropriate judgment, or not having been between gifted and talented, right? Back to the joke. Between gifted and talented, because my parents weren't super poor, but we were still from the poorer part of town. I still have thought that we had okay income. Like I felt like, hey, to other humans, I'm not doing too bad. Um, which is maybe where I got some of the anti-natalist ethic of, or natalist argument, like, hey, if you can do well, that's what you need to do in order to raise kids. Make certain you're doing well. Um, which is part and parcel the guilt of not acquiring a fairly well-paying job that would have at the birth, or that early in its development, 1998, 1999, for game making. Individuals didn't specialize. They had a general knowledge of all of the software, in terms of, like, you didn't become somebody that worked with skins and bones and weighting. And I even think now they specialize those out. Like, hey, we'll just get those people that weight the skin, and then over here you'll get the boners, and they're the ones that are throwing the skeletal frame, the skeletal geometric metaphoric frame that looks nothing really like a skeleton, because it doesn't need to. It just has to function closely enough for the lowest bits at the time. Of course, medical 3D art, it's more of utilizing X-rays, and then making the information then. But anyway, there were certain unintuitive, less intuitive things at the time. Meaning ZBrush hadn't come out in 1999, as far as I knew. So even the structural development of 3D art was limited to designing it on the outside, right? Having the designers design it. And so anyway, they knew my attention to detail in some of my artwork. If you go to mikefahl.com, MikeFahl.com, you scroll down to clowns, you're going to see a violent dentist clown. Like, fuck, man, that's a tight piece. I did that when I was 20, right? And then later on, I did these really dumbed down versions of clowns, because oddly enough, after I'd painted these princesses, I'm getting all over the map here. After painting these 3 princesses, really high end shit, what I thought was, some of my best work, and another piece at that time, I did 4 for that series, and made like 3,000, like 1,000 of each princess piece, and none of the 4th piece until later on. I did an open edition. I still sell an open edition of that one. But anyway, the point is, I was doing some tight work back in the day, and this game company recognized my capability as an artist, and so that's why they were willing to pay me this money to start out. And I was offered this much earlier than anybody that I'd gone to school with. And these were, 2 of them were mathematicians. One of them was an English major. Really trying to remember what Jer was going to school for. I don't know. He was reading a lot of English and taking a lot of general subjects, and he ended up becoming a business guy and inherited. His family became pretty wealthy in insurance, and then I guess he took some of that wealth and he turned it into a beauty school for women, and he makes good money that way now. Anyway, the point is, and then another guy became a heart surgeon, or not, a stomach surgeon, a stomach surgeon. Like a lot of people eventually. Another guy became a photographer after becoming a computer networker, and then one mathematicians became a routing engineer, and still works as a router tech and advisor and educator now, making good money. Anyway, before all these guys took off, I was still younger, because I was their contemporary in age, and I was offered this position, and their initial positions were not even this much. I mean, the doctor's situation would have been different. How much does an intern get paid, essentially, or a resident, if you will, like, or do they get paid at that point? And anyway, point is I don't know. All I know is my forecast was I was coming in faster and hotter with the job for people that were going through college looking for jobs in their field earlier than all of my friends, meaning none of them had gotten a job offer in their field at that high rate. And I had worked in house as an illustrator, doing commissions just post college in my college town. And so I was pretty swift with that. And I had taken down to Salt Lake and then moved back up there for a job. And that was before I was offered this job that I let go. Anyway, so I harbored a lot of guilt towards the guy for taking me from there. But back to the joke, still gifted and talented. See, now here I'm gathering thoughts vertically and historically, and then I'm trying to reattempt a suboptimization to the memory of the more recent story, which is gifted and talented. So let me just finish that one up. Gifted and talented program, right? That's what they called it. And because my family had a little bit of money, even though my parents both worked and so forth, even though we had a little bit of money, I would tell people like, "Hey, I thought I was in the gifted and talented program. I thought I was talented, but really, my parents gifted me a lot, right? Like they bought me the supplies that I needed. Like I didn't have to go hustle lemonade for 10 cents to buy pencils and paper, you know, and they did okay in supplying me art supplies when I was a kid, and even supplying, I didn't, I was gifted in that my parents said, "Look, Mike, we're going to pay for you to go to college, and we're going to buy your first car. Those are the things we're going to do for you." They've done a shitload more uh, for me than that, but nonetheless, some of the other kids, even wealthier kids, were adamant about not taking money from their parents. One guy had a really rough understanding with his dad. And he came from a better to do family, but he hustled his way through college. Justin did. Another guy got noted as having a learning disability. Um, I mentioned him, but I won't match him in the story. And he became very, very wealthy and very successful, and was quite able to learn once he trusted his ability to learn. I was busy tracing and retracing, mimicking habits of other people. That's why meeting a personality that was like the guy that drew me up to Bellingham. When I first met him, I knew there was something just heavily off about him enough, and he kind of reminded me of a Mendham, meaning like long hair and sort of ragtag, like like I'm trying to remember this Sesame Street character that comes out and he's got this big brown hair and he's like as big as Big Bird, right? He bounces there, he goes, "Yeah," and it looks almost like dreads. Maybe it's like a tree. It was like this scruffy nerf herding looking dude, like Amanda. Right? Not that I'm not looking like a big scruffy mullet wearing cream pie asshole. Like couldn't believe it, man. Saw this redheaded lady, this redheaded girl with a mullet, like a scruffy mullet today. And I mean, I see punk chicks and I see shaved heads and I see all sorts of stuff, but this redhead, thick, like super uber duper thick redhead hair, cut into this weird mullet and just the outfit, but really more about the hair. I just had to comment on her hair because I was on the mic, the mighty Mike Master today talking. Anyway, the point is I say, oh yeah, I was gifted, so I wasn't very talented, right? So basically, I had made a self-declaratory statement about my art to finish the gifted and talented joke after 20 minutes. Yeah, yesterday was also tough too because Mm. I was upset about several things. One, I got more in a panic about my mom having a stroke. That turns out it wasn't really the case. And if it was, I mean, it's not severe. I went there, but the way the incident was framed was more um, horrific, more mortal mm, than the story was more mortal being conveyed to me. The urgency went beyond the needed reality, but information was being passed around, so interpretations got involved. But there was that, and then I'm suing my homeowners association for parking problems because basically they took our public commons area, and because they were unwilling to put in a proper towing policy and running a proper towing policy, the management, who get paid roughly $8,000 more a year than they really need to get paid compared to competitive wages. But these guys have been around here running this mom and pop's dog and pony show called My Condominium Complex, built in 1970, kind of the way they wanted to before I got here 11 years ago, and utilizing old covenants from 1983. And anyway, I'm busy dropping code, Utah housing code from 2014 into their email, having to fight to even get their email address because they're so busy taping up billboards and waiting for meeting dates. And I said, look, it's incumbent upon you as the manager of this facility. Like, you'll add security lights and you'll add cameras that you are looking at, like that you're recording for this, because they're investors in their property, but they're also invested in being management beyond their interests for the place as a community. They're looking at it more as their place as an investment, because I won't give the appropriate number, but out of 100, these guys own um, more than 25%, or one guy does, the management does. And the other guy, who he speaks on his behalf, and they kind of wash each other's shoulders, purchases more than another 50%, which changed the way the FCIA does its mortgage loans. And so once they acquired more property here than owners had it changed the area to not, they're not called apartment buildings because they're still officially condos, but because there's more investors that are not resident owners, it changed the status to like an investment, like an apartment. And so mortgages were no longer being taken out. Anyway, there's a whole history of this place I can't get into. But pools being taken out, hot tubs being taken out, different, people being paid, companies, preferred companies being used, being paid $20,000 more than they needed to be paid. And then wondering about kickbacks with allegations of all sorts of shit. And I'm just wondering to what extent these guys are pretty bad. Not bad in they're like everything they're doing, they're able to hide behind old dated laws and embed themselves in things. And so I'm taking them to court to sue them because basically they cannot divide my undivided interest in the public parking and then resell it back to me, which is what they did. Other than my covered parking, which they gave me a sticker for, then they tried to resell my access back to me for what started out as $300, then became arbitrarily $240. And even when they couldn't sell all of them, and more people are now parked outside of the complex on the streets, they are selling our undivided interest back to us for $120 per annum for parking. And out of principle alone, I mean, I have tenants and other people that I would like to come here. And if the costs were $3, I might, like I did when I picked up mine, is write under duress on the receipt or on my printed contract with them for the decal, which they printed back, meaning that I need to show the judge that going through this is me being under duress for the duration of time between now and the filings, and then trying to get even the adequate information from them about what are the current covenants, um, who is our insurance carrier, our overarching insurance company that will insist on litigating against the lawsuit against me. May I speak with them? So yes, I call them. Just getting information out of management. They were compliant. I had to legal ease format it, shoot photos, send it back to them, put it in terms of this is evidence, or this is evidence of me requesting this information from management. Please reply at this time. Anyway, so I'm suing these guys. My mom had this stroke thing. I had just got done barking at this guy and his son, the management, about this case before I shoot myself in my own foot and increase my own homeowners association costs paying for the litigation. We do have another homeowners association meeting on the 28th, right? And basically, so I sent the management the code, which is generally a bad idea to send your opponent what it is you're doing. But because these guys stand by a banner of Jesus Christ, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they even have a Jesus picture in their complex there, right? I felt that they were being less than virtuous in not keeping up on proper Utah code. And I think there's even a code that says that all management, like the treasurer and not management, but the members of an HOA, like the president and the secretary and the treasurer and so forth, the person keeping the minutes, I guess it's the secretary, that they're all familiar with what the current condominium laws are, right? And that there's basically a law stating that they have to be. Or at least I implied that I think I read something about that. But anyway, so I recently, though, sent these guys the code that said if an HOA votes against people's undivided interest in property, then the rule is null and void. And so I sent them an email showing them this Utah code and showing them the definitions of parking as commons area, and that basically they can't steal my shit and sell it back to me. And anyway, the whole point is that I barked at these guys, and then later in the evening, things doubled up. And the double sin of redemption away from sobriety is purity, and purity is cleanliness, and cleanliness is closer to God. So one should not intoxicate themselves, hence perverting their vision, and hence maybe not having a sense. Oh, God, what's the word? Discern. Not being able to discern appropriately, or have no sense of discernment, right? So I don't know which is more contradictory: applying your lack of discernment, right, or applying one's intoxicated and poor discernment, right? When one's absence of discernment intersects with one's poor ability to discern, I want to put that in a contradictory category, right? Because both of those are conceptual and eidetic, yet they're aligned isomorphically with the words that I'm saying. It's not merely a concept. It's a concept that's guided by a narrative with a lexicon, right? But the absence of discernment, or having poor discernment, or discernment that is based on an intoxicated field, it limits your chance of choosing correctly. One might even say it demands that you have not chosen correctly. And so if you necessarily have not chosen correctly via your intoxication, or you're incapable of utilizing a discernment field, right? This whole idea that you move through time with a sense of value overlooks what your body's doing that you're not paying attention to. There are actually also facts that are happening in space and time, but I'm not really thinking about, where my left ankle is right now relative to the bag on the ground. I'm not thinking about it until I thought about it, right? Before then, it was just this like zombie flophouse bodily fact or attribute that it took pointing to it with language before it actually had any activative, a referent of meaning, right? But prior to that, it was nonetheless supposedly yielding some sort of important facts, and that like that absence of knowing something until you point to it, that might be what an intoxicated and or a lack of a discernment field of value looks like. One might also pick their nose. One might debate between going to start their coffee or take a piss in the morning, or whatever ordering of showering processes and self-maintenances that people go through that are simply just different. I mean, some people wash their ass before they shampoo their hair, and other people, they do it contrary to that, and they order the one before the next, right? So, anyway, the whole point, though, is that I think certain what are called trivial ideas are not necessarily pointing to value. So certain people like Jordan B. Peterson, he's popular today, and he's making the assumption that you move through time only to order your value perception of the alien fields and the algorithms and the bent croups of this and that. And anyway, okay, let me try to reloop some of this back together, though. So, um, I had recently fallen off the wagon. And the moment that I fell off the wagon, it appeared as if the Matrix was offering me a ghost rider. Uh, I like to call them demon runs, only because they're so sped up and they're volatile. And what I realized was one of the synchronicities that I realized was that because at different times, like if I was going to smoke, sometimes the lighter, I'd have to click it 3 times. Like, I own this on the third, right? Like in Fight Club, you promised 3 times, right? Like you've created a geometry of justice in a triad, right? Anyway, so there was this idea of um, sobriety that came with it. This very contentious, very judgmental, very binary. You're going to go to hell, God. Right. Like I'm not saving your ass. With you do this or else sort of heavy hand. Like, right. And then there was just this sense of placidness and peace. And I even thought, God, Christ is peace. And if my universe is seemingly at peace, then that's really a nice way to be on, right? Prince of Peace, everything's at ease, everything's at peace. And then kind of like construction going on in the background, like these urban industrial sounds, like vans backing up and beeping, or dump trucks, or right now there's this very low hum that sounds like maybe an air conditioner or something on another building. But anyway, the whole point was this, is that as my thoughts increased, sometimes the coincidence, right? Because I was determining symbol sets to be occurring with a phase frequency such that I had to allow for all meaning to be focused upon via my mind, right? To read the tea leaves of symbols on the wall, one must be aware of the symbols, right? and that there was this phase that required a discernment of particular meaning. And I think that was the first scaling. Anyway, the point is right when I fell off the wagon, these huge volatile sounds occurred. All of a sudden, bullet bikes the sound became a visual metaphor, signifieds in my head in geometric ways, right? So the sound itself started, like music has a language to it, people say, right? But what is the music intending, right? Like a lot of old movies would show like tension between potential lovers in a theater, or tension between a murder going on in a theater and the murderer, like these dramatic tensions that are built up around the air of the music itself, like Wagner and some murder scene projected on a bad Lincoln movie, because I don't think Wagner was out then, but it would have been perfect. But not really, because I don't think he was singing opera. Or maybe he was. What was Lincoln singing? Oh, that's right. You don't know because you're simply a movie called Moonwalkers that I can't get this old system to play. Um oh yeah, and the documentary still, I mean, you can go to my site and you can still look at it, and it still hasn't officially gone uh, out yet. Anyway, I'm not going to get on that. That's all different. I'm not going to tell you that. Anyway, and maybe it's not any big deal, because what I'm actually talking about is more of a big deal. Anyway, so I had sync phased a meaning discernment level that happened in time at different dimensions. Meaning, I would hear or see a symbol, and I would focus on it until it meant something. But sometimes it took other symbols colliding with that symbol in my mind to mean something in the environment, like one is moved and motivated by music. And then that's what drew me up to the Red Star in Montana, that I say is a supernatural event, which even today I was like, what kind of, like, in the future there'll be drones and mimicking machines that can mimic that, and people will look back on it like the hoax that 9/11 wasn't an inside job, like the whole idea that you could make a cell phone call in a plane, and you couldn't do that. The planes couldn't even do that in 2003, and I had made a video, and I had even posted it. I don't know what channel it was, but it was online, of me attempting to make a phone call in 2003 on a plane, knowing that this turn off your cell phones thing going on planes was merely part of the whole cover up of, look, we don't turn off your cell phones, even though they're not going to take down this plane. We're going to tell you that it might, and that we would prefer less interference. So I'm not saying they didn't justify, they scientifically made a justification. But really, I believe it was to cover up the fact that there were no phone calls made from planes on 9/11, and that the tech to do so, even in 2003, was not available. So that the recordings of the one plane that spoke of, spoke of their conversations was in my mind not only fabricated, but that it was related that way. And in my point is that in the future there will be plenty of drone technology, VR technology, and other technology to make claims beyond DMT, right, beyond hallucination, that were more perceptual or spiritual access to things become aware to me. But I didn't know if this was like a Dante path. And then I thought, it's most definitely a Dante path. And then I thought, blah 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 blah. Anyway, the point is that after all of this Puritanism, and the handy-handedness of a jealous God, an angry God, I fell off the wagon, as if I couldn't hold the line, as if I needed my frequency, my brain as frequency, intoxicated frequency, is itself also not outside of the grand godly plan, so to speak, right? And so upon my detox or my intox, my retox, so all those are true. They all align. They're all descriptive, and yet intox, detox, and retox. Hey, dumb idiot, Rita. Right? It's this triad, right, of nonsense. But it became difficult as a practice. But once I intoxicated my body, and I felt my body become intoxicated, and everything shift in my behavior, almost part of like the holographic technique, right? And then the law of attraction, or you're attracting what you are. So if you dress nice, you'll attract something. Really, if you floss, you'll attract something. Whatever you do, right? Today I was wearing a lei, I think, because it matched my messy hair, right? And because I like wearing leis and certain necklaces on my sales day, which is a day of Sundays where I work, which is the one day of the Sabbath not to work. Blah blah blah. And I'll get back into that. Anyway, point is this: is right when I fell off the wagon, all of a sudden the media on the radio became this very loving, like, you are so important. You are so needed. God loves you so much that you do not even know how important you are to all this. Basically, your shit doesn't stink, and don't think that it does. Sort of blow smoke. But it was also authentic, and it seemed as real as a type of media revelation that one mind in this particular context could have. And I took it as, oh, that's that's the loving, that's the forgiving Christ in this motherly voice, right? Anyway, and so I'm arguing with these guys about suing, and at the same time, I'm falling off the wagon, and there's Bloody Mary mix. My roommates and I went to get a vodka for drinking Bloody Marys. I'm in an argument with them, seeing Christ on the wall, seeing this guy's eyes bug out. Like if you go to MikePhil.com and you go to clowns and you look for, I think it's Hug Machine, it should be on there. The guy's got cat eyes and goat's eyes and this like burning red hair with a flame behind him and a knife, and it's called Love Machine or Hug Machine. Should be on there. I don't know. I'm not going to pull it up. Anyway, point is behind him was this Christ picture, and then later I'm ready to drink Bloody Mary mix, and I thought, well, I didn't want to be derogatory against the symbol set that I read often by, it's already bad enough that I've fallen off if your body's your temple, don't fall off the wagon and intoxicate the body, right? You be good to your body. But I was allowed that with a sense of forgiveness, right? And anyway, I had eventually started a recording of my roommates without them knowing. Even though I had contracted with them, in my contract with them is we will videotape and we will take no selfies of the others unless there's consent. And a week prior, we were all up in the morning dancing, and one of my roommates said, well, we weren't dancing too. They were kind of joking around, dancing. Okay, we should do like morning recordings with Mike. Yeah, we could do a whole deal out of it. And I took that as like this broken Chronos, like, oh, the guy gave me consent a week ago. And anyways, but there was also this conflict between drinking Bloody Marys and seeing this picture of Jesus, the Mormon painted Jesus, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, very noble, like, let's get through this day sort of thing. And I mean, it's okay that there's seriousness in the reverence, and the painting is okay, I suppose. And I don't even mind certain LDS attributes of thinking, even though some of it seems like justifying a mythic world projection over this world and saying archaeologically they align, or even symbolically through Egyptian Abrahamic record being misread compared to all Egyptologists and the Rosetta Stone and what we consider to be modern day translation of Egyptian hieroglyphics, which I generally align. But anyway, but then the supernatural experience kind of really opened the domain, and then that brought up exegesis and eisegesis and other people's dependency towards other people's accounts of their remarkable supernatural interactions. And maybe I fell short even on that. Like, I did not allow that red star and hop out of my car and go like pray to it and wait to see if it was like I was Highlander and it was going to enter me. But I did think that that was what its intent was. But when I saw it, I did also think like this could be like a burning bush, like a conveyance of info. But I felt like I missed that time. Anyway, point is that I recorded my roommates and they were upset. The other one was considerably upset, even though I was recording no illicit behavior. So the 6 eyeballs affixed to 3 individuals in a different contractual relationship mirrored my conflict, my contractual relationship with my homeowners association. My defuncting and reintoxicating and becoming forgiven for violation of my body was one thing, but to drink Bloody Marys was less, because it's a vodka-based drink, it's not even a wine-based drink. Like, I was trying to justify why it was insulting, like symbolically, even though I realized I had already gotten over, listened to, but getting over certain directive symbol sets. Because I can't keep up with them all. I think I can. I used to think I could. It's like, look, you're double 00007 agent, and we just require that 10 times a day you dart all over the universe like a batshit animal that doesn't harm anything to not quite complete a shitload of missions, and we'll be okay. Like, that's almost how following it might be. Not necessarily that taxing, but sometimes it feels like I'm getting a lot of a spiritual influence, if you will. You can ascribe it to my psychology if you want. You guys are more than capable of seeing it that way, right? Certainly, there's a Utah code that my HOA can point to that says, hey, you follow the covenants that you agreed to when you bought the property. And in those covenants, if there's a contradiction that says, hey, we can basically steal your fucking parking and sell it out piecemeal whenever we want. And that's the angle they're going to approach the law. Then there's conflict anyway. And so in one way, the upset became a contradiction that was a metaphor of another contradiction. But this one was more problematic. It was like taking the neutral and the positive of neutral monism and pitting it against a binary of negative, as opposed to taking the neutral and putting it on the negative and having the negative and the neutral pit itself against the positive. And so it was quite a shift. Or like, I don't know, I like to compare it to what a hot dog might do if it's falling into through a drain. You know what I mean? Like bounce is going to hit here, and then it's going to flop a little, and then this part's going to go over here and go clunk, clunk, clunk. You know, like as if you were going to animate. How would you animate your uncooked hot dog going into a drain? I don't know. Anyway, that dang all of these external data sets as being meaningful groupings, whether, and regardless of the timing in which them came about. Like this very narrative, right, takes on a very spotty role, and people would say, hey, it's word salad, which you could say is the case and not be wrong. But I like to think that people that can pick up what I'm laying down are very thoughtful individuals, and that if I'm rotating my tomatoes under and my onions from underneath my leafy greens, and I might be able to like regroup the tomatoes in a pile that almost even looks like it might be an uncut tomato for a moment. You guys might say, "Oh, well, it is word salad," but look at what he's done with that word salad. Right? Um, I can see all the ingredients in that amazing word salad. It was wonderful to eat. And it was vegan too, except for the wiener story, the hot dog story. Anyway, I guess I'm also going through conflict with my girlfriend because I don't know. I shouldn't even refer to her as my girlfriend, as my ex-girlfriend, because we're so far banged out of this universe. Both of us, meaning in traditional relationship senses, that apparently both she and I feel that it's important to take long periods apart, and even to the point of maybe not going back. Like, do extensive vacations away from the other one, please. And not really feel a lot of ill will towards the other one. But you cross that boundary of resentment where every time you're oscillating in and out of a relationship, some people that didn't have to work that eventually do have to go to work, or where one partner goes to work after they've spent like years just lounging and vacationing and hanging out together, and now one of them is regimented. It's like that kind of weird, sort of missing, somebody leaving sense of youthful romantic closeness that people find virtue in an attempt to redefine later on in life, and some are successful and some are not, and mine remains in a high volatility sense. And anyway, so when I did intoxicate, all of a sudden my frequencies, I went dull, where the universe started tuning in with very high industrial sounding frequencies that seemed to only be exactly concurrent in the moment, right? There is not this phase of meaning. It's more like it's happening. And when I catch up with the meaning, it makes sense. And I was thinking about Wittgenstein's meaning is use, right? And what the exceptions to his meaning is use rule is, as he caveated in, I believe, 142 or 143 of Philosophical Investigations. I think that's it. So 142, 143, probably 143. Anyway, and so he caveats his meaning is use, and I thought, well, once one has the tracks laid down dogmatically in their mind about what a railroad station of consideration looks like, such that they become idealized or metaphorically convinced of it, if they then align a theological buttress to it, which is rationally appropriate in a questing mind, to then erase the tracks, and have this ideology like erasing the veins and just seeing the blood. This mental erector set becomes something for VR play, virtual reality play, in terms of comparing what one is sensing. Anyway, I had defaulted to go on this demon ride, even though I was being indicated to do so. And then I thought, man, you're going to pay for that. Like the vengeful God, you may have been cover coded But, oh, he hasn't forgotten about you. No, no, no. But then I thought, oh, well, hasn't he? You know, what do we have here? Van Vane. Someone's calling in. Oh, yeah. No, not letting her in on this monologue. Anyway, so the point was, though, also there were certain indicators to move north, but they were predecessing symbols that suggested that I should not continue to heavily masochistically damage my body in order to go, either a demon hiding inside of my own historic soul, demon hunting in the jihadic, it's outside of you sort of way, demon hunting in that we now are producing space police. Why? Because we are meeting other, not just maybe physiological alien entities, but maybe we're actually combating other sentient alien activities, and that there are, I mean, my mind could just go crazy, but there are such things as X-Men powers, right? Meaning it's like spiritual mutation, where then one can take these tracks and then identify with the tracks such that their identity becomes like, oh, I'm a furry now. I'm off to pork somebody in the street dressed in an animal outfit or whatever. I just found out recently. I thought furries were just a fetish to dress like animals. I didn't know it was like some invitational open sex club activity or whatnot. And I thought, oh, this is very peculiar. But um, oh, anyway, so back to the Bloody Mary story, right? Drinking Bloody Marys with vodka and not wine, when Christ made wine, and here's Mary and Bloody Mary. And I thought, blood, but women bleed all the time. It's a Bloody Mary, but it's a metaphor and it's a pun and it's against the Catholic Church. And these guys just had this Christian thing, and I have this kind of like thing still that's not entirely anti certain architectures of LDS fundamental, theological structure, their mythos, if you will. And I even did a painting, Mythos intersects Theos, with centaurs of Sagittarius warring against the devil on Devil's Tower, as if it was a nighttime and hence binary scene where dark equals that which is evil and night is evil and less crispicular and definitely not diurnal. But because I wasn't, this painting wasn't a God painting, but it was like, and then the argument, like, well, you know, like the devil is like an internal organ of God, right? It's like eating liver. Like, yeah, we're gonna filter your blood and your shit and your bile through that, and some people who like to eat internal organs will eat livers. That's the liver is your Satan, which has nothing to do with Egyptian mythology. Apparently, your liver is very important, and the brains were just sucked out and spat onto the sidewalk. I think what the Egyptians were doing by sucking out brains and spitting it is basically, it was like one of those old school TVs with the antennas that were ears, right? I guess I should do that. Ear antennas, and it was like busting those off, and then so it would like bust off those antennas so we can fit this TV in the back of my truck, right? Like they become auxiliary, less than the TV itself, replaceable. So the brain, as just merely antenna, was just sucked out through the nasal cavity or whatever, and then not given a canoptic jar for saving. I gotta get rid of that antenna. And that's why my lobotomy doesn't kick in. My drinking chemical lobotomy still only appears to have come into effect. And maybe when I'm making drunken videos before I pass out, yelling about the amazing atheist being a Slaven pig, I can remember those things. But anyway, the point is that the mythos was on, the race was on. I wasn't up for the fight. I wasn't fresh from the fight. I wasn't fresh to the fight. Things got a little complicated, and to be quite frank, I didn't know exactly where it was taking me again. And this time, I thought, I have better things to do than be immediately compulsive. And before you know it, everything was just a-okay. And then I thought, yeah, this is just like, not saying everything is a-okay, but it's like, being able to cork up a drain before you wash a hot dog through it, right? It was like twisting off, like not twisting shut something, but more like taking a towel. Like if you used a towel or a plastic sheet, and you were trying to like bottle up the water, you would take the bottle of there be in it, and you'd like twist it and twist the base of it off, right? Something like that. Look, I'm just going to twist myself away from these dark forces or highly volatile forces. But there's always industrial machinery to remind me that they're there and they're not fucking around. But the idea of a self and a projected necessary self into some notion of future binaries seems both applicably true, nonsensical, sensical, um, and also unknown and in a way untrue, which is another contradiction. I mean, because it seemingly is all of those things in those quadrants. True, not true, outrightly unknowable, and kind of absurd. I mean, the strata of positions that people have and the experiences that they have. So this one guy is named Saint Tommy, right? He's my example. He's not absurd, but I had to like double think. But anyway, so he coined a term in my mind called hypergrace. It was funny watching him argue with Calvinists before I knew that Calvinist was actually like a very discreet, very hardline version of Protestantism. I couldn't scale out the aspects or certain robust aspects of different religious bodies like Calvinism, compared to Episcopalians or um, Baptists or Lutherans or something like that, right? So anyway, point is that Saint Tommy believes in hypergrace, and that was in a way like a remuneration, not just that you can recriminate, but this allowance of look, you're still a beast, a creature, live your life with peace and freedom and don't feel compelled here and actually do what you want there. And it gave kind of a bottom twisting off notion where for years after already tumbling downhill, I was not just a rock that was attempting to tumble downhill. I was speeding up my going downhill process. Okay, fuck you, Nietzsche. The real Zarathustra walking into the village, right? I'm like Wittgenstein's students that he says to go work in the hardware store, like go sit on the street and see what the fuck people are really talking about to get an idea of how the vocabulary is working. Then I also thought of this guy, Azrianok, who's been on the tubes and how we engaged and how he's raising a young boy now who's an infant. And I wondered what he would say as an author and philosopher about language acquisition and language study of his child. right? But I wonder that of parents, but I think most parents just, they go through the process. They're amazed that they're going through the process, but I doubt very few of them are linguists and analyzing the relational aspects and would be able to articulate on that. I mean, I did know one guy that was a botanist and he was teaching his infant kid all the Latin of all these plants that look the same to me, which is very variant gradations of difference. Different leaf colors and different leaf shape changes and different sizes, and then different families, different genuses. And the kid was just mentioning the Latin, just like the good old dad was teaching him. Out beside of old man, good old Aggie Quad years ago. Anyway, something I don't have a son to teach, which is once again another lament and like the last vestige of weird hope is that I'm still a family guy in contradiction and in irrelation to whatever the managed virtuous system is of amendum as scaling suffering and pain to the bad camp by necessity in all cases. And I just say, I can't let you say by necessity in all cases. In my attempt to articulate a domain where the psyche and one's bodily emotions separate off, and one's mind preferences the bodily absent domain over the bodily responsive domain, because at one point, like having someone smack cymbals behind your head when you're not knowing, right? Bam. Your body, if it's in enough pain, will you will de you will I presume, based on all of the people I talk to, right? There's my favorite amputee, double amputee came out. He realizes there's a type of enlightenment that comes through having to just accept ongoing, nonstop, irregardable, very high levels of pain. You surrender to it, right? And then your mind, at least at a time, for a time, even for sustained periods of time, accepts that as the new norm. And then you have a contrary position at this point, because the new norm is what you used to call a shitload of pain. And because of that new norm and that new water table, like measuring a lake's height or its level relative to the shore, the old barometer was different, right? And that's like evolutionary theory is based on stress levels, but it's also based on biological progression. So, as much as the intellect or the psyche, the feminine psyche, not the masculine, like Jordan B. Peterson says, oh, psyche and consciousness, that's male, it's well ordered. Love, that's emotional, that's feminine. How about Cupid and Psyche, motherfucker? Cupid and Psyche, right? Cupid's the boy. It's love. Psyche's the mind, right? The well-ordered psyche. Anyway, whole point is, this will be an interesting video to listen back on, because I'll be watching where I exhale and kind of like, well, maybe I can grant over something here and maybe grant over something there. I'll eventually read some of these comments. Um, I'm just hoping to actually get to the point of my story altogether, which is not just to get to this pain splitting part, but in a way, it's to try to index not only different spiritual and biological and time oriented and Um, Meaning any domain of consideration becomes viable if one preferences themselves as having been coming from there, right? Like people feel like, hey, I'm walking through these woods, or, these guys are talking about, hey, don't mistake the trees for the forests, but who gives a fuck about that, right? That's just the first dimension. The second dimension is easily like trying to figure out what fucking forest you're in. Is this Sherwood Forest or some fucking canyon, or am I on a hill, or is Rocky Sylvester Stallone playing Rambo in that cave over there? Am I part of the Appalachian Hillbillies? Am I on desert terrain, forest? What's the botanical grouping look like? Right. And trying to ascertain where one's paradigm, their personal landscape, their personal and individual eyeballs have always emerged from, and then making general assumptions about what you believe, or general aspects about what you believe another person is saying, in order to give it a robust and honest consideration, right? And then remove the honest part and give it the most robust minus honesty. Give it the most robust considerations where you pluck out all the virtuous feathers from it and see what sort of carcass shape you're left with here. And from that, use other apple cores or carcasses and make a raft out of these apple cores, or these plucked apart bird carcasses, or whatever they are, and we'll all float on. That's right, already. No, 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 already. Let's hop on this raft of carcasses. And anyway, and so to give Overamendum his credit in terms of, hey, we're all just exploiting these other organisms. He doesn't even say right down to the fucking bacteria and the shit. Like, just breathing kills shit. Like, just walking kills shit. Like, just existing kills shit. And then as we relate to the higher sentient animals, we're just killing this shit. And then relating to the exploitation and use of other individuals and their money, and or their labor, or their money's relationship to the economy, different uh, groups of people who have used the medium of exchange to acquire certain shit or control certain activity, or control their body for what they believe is a good hearty day's work of hard work for the man pays the taxes, I go home, eat, drink, uh, raise the kids, and have a good time with the wife. Bump it about middle class functional America. Those who are actually doing the breeding, right? Not those on the streets running the drugs, begging for money. Not saying that some of those people are not from virtuous domains, and not trying to make general stereotypical um, notions, because luck is a factor. Intelligence, resources, history, these are all factors in people's wealth, and then their spiritual directions and the aspects in which they spend their time, and how they curtail their time through time. Like, is this time well spent, folks? Thanks for being with me today. I hope your time was well spent. Oh, Van Veen's out. I'll have to look later. Anyway, okay, so I guess the last thing to unfold would be the point of the story, and I'm wondering even if I had a point to this particular story. Oh, other than, yeah, I think VR is good comparative, spiritual and ideal analysis. I think game makers get to explore certain levels of conversation when they're communing about their creations in groups. And I will always lament not having a career path in that career path. I lament my age, I feel as if I've moved into esoteric domains and preferenced those esoteric domains, and have even garnered particular insight from them. But um, and it does feel as if stakes are ramping up. My documentary is no longer called Maestro; it's called The Mad World of Mike Fail, and I'm going like, "Oh, great! Am I supposed to be angry?" And the guy's like, "No, I mean mad, as in, you're crazy." I know. That's why I brought up being mad. Also, what's in a name? Great. Anyway, whole point is, then I thought, well, maybe it's good to be a little angry. And last year was very like part of spiritual phoenix development out of levels of pain, where one rises out of ashes and happens to meet a lot of women named Ashley at the time, and moves through different fire symbolisms, should not necessitate that they're bound by a wrathful theological god. The genre of symbol sets also needs to be not necessarily discrete and particularized, meaning you necessarily must move through a vague domain of not knowing where the fuck you are before you finally figure out which forest you're in, which Dagobah system or planet that you're on, before you meet your weird Yoda or not. If you're post Yoda, right, you become a Jedi already, so to speak, right? But maybe you're not doing your duties. So what, you pull a Luke, you go away, you pray, you show up somewhere, fight some imagined war, and then you die? And I'm like, what's all this death promotion shit? I mean, there's all this death denial. My mom's aging, she has a stroke. I hear other people dying. I even known people dying. Like they're gone. Out of this realm, and maybe altogether, even if there are supernatural entities, maybe they're not duplicated, post-embodied somethings. Maybe we are merely these gabagoobas that are tied in mentally to the other gabagoobas. But we don't have anything beyond this. Or the precious idea. Well, at least you influenced the gobbledygooba in the grand ecology of gobbledygooba aquarium isms incorporated ink stamped by Allah himself. All of the non-interest bearing Muslim God, as opposed to the infidel, Judeo, false Palestinian, anti-Jewish, Jewish people, blah, in Israel, fighting us, trying to maintain your interest in this land as a bottle, as a cork above Africa, as well as controlling economies around the world and throwing people into debt and trying to propagandize and blah, 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 blah. And there's a lot of good people there too, with good intent. It's like collusion. I think it was Arthur Rimbaud that couldn't stand the fact that his species of I guess, white men was a collusive pack of clowns that get together to collude to rip the fuck out of their resources and make certain that they live heartily, right? And as an adult man, having my best bread and butter swiped from me, so to speak. It's been an interesting, perilous journey trying to come back way around with re-identifications and re-histories. And I guess that's what I was saying, is that at least, even though I'm off the wagon, I'm intoxicated, and what the fuck good is a guy my age doing, flopping his ass around, criticizing a drunk atheist, when I'm behaving like an exhaustive atheist, trying to retract away from it, but forgiven by it, but not necessarily, but who knows, right? This like spiritual Abrahamic binary guided God yada that I get twisted off from, and then I'm over here in some other spot and I'm okay for it. Right? Like I could spend my life being a biblical scholar and a monk and meditate, and I'm not that. And I don't know what kind of artist I am. I don't know what kind of violations I am causing in this new meta world. All I know is everything's new in Jesus, and brand new day, and blah blah blah. Today's a new day, and so if I say everything's new in Jesus and it's a new day, does that mean the same thing as it's have a nice day? Like it's a new day, have a nice day. Like wake up in the morning, like fuck it, it's a holiday. Put your tears in a bucket. I didn't make that up. That's copy. That's me mimicking shit. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's the point. Is I just kind of want to articulate these weird, current, somewhat contradictory, somewhat trying to parallel contradictions together to see how how I can both empathize with somebody that's at the brute, like the legal butt, and yet having some sort of leveraging power. I'm trying to garner like a mechanical, like how, like if you had to create a metaphor of something that appeared to violate something, to witness a violation and then mimic a violation, where the mimicking was more like a nip and not a bite, as Anton might say, right? But that the nip is like like a requirement of, it's like a part of the chainmail of the mechanism, meaning it's an authentic violation and it's in and of itself, but that it mirrors another somebody else's violation from which you're justified. I don't know, it's almost like, hey, I have this problem, so in order to understand it better, let me act like it, we perform a function like that, and then but do so as if I'm a smaller Russian doll within this larger Russian doll, as if it can't shrink down to size, as if it's not like living in a motorhome where your space is closer inside than freeing and vasting and changing outside, as opposed to this apartment, which has its ceiling height and its relatively static outside environment, which would be different than a high ceilinged mansion on the beaches of Florida, and I could walk around all day with my money and my champagne and my dog and my boat and my this and my that, and other things that other people do that I don't do, or I don't do it that often. It's not that I don't do it or haven't done it, just not with that context. So anyway, with all of this, should I just rename this pity party? So is that the name of this? Okay. Anyway, let's get to reading some of these so I can close up shop. At least one of us on this feed has to take a dump soon. And that would be me. Okay, Bark Lord. Good morning. Morning, my off kilter. All right. And Van Veen writes, quote of 2018, she's banned. Me, Helena, banned from Chrysalim. So, Van Veen has an update on his being banned. Interesting. Have a good week, Mike, or I will kill you. I'm reality. Stop hoarding now, Bacon. Oh, I'm upset. Mike, you are my number 6 after James Bond, Ben C, Ray, Molly, and Gunless. A, and Helena is a super angel. She is above 1. Soliloquies are permitted, Mike. No, see, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm not. Oh, okay. I'm not gonna say. They are permitted. Perhaps you guys aren't seeing what my camera is doing. But my actual screen, like this screen is thick, right? And so the whites will often turn yellow, and in this case, they're turning red. So the white of the ceiling isn't. But maybe the blacks. Maybe the blacks are turning red. It's interesting. Okay. Anyway, fall is getting a little snippy, snarky boy. I want you to start counseling Dio again. He's back and not crying. I'm gonna stop now. Enough date points. Oh, final date point is the fastest probe ever on the way to the sun. And there's a shooting star, nerds, or falling stars. See, I used to even think, well, if God the Father is the Sun, like the SUN, and like the sun, I'm like an angel or a myth or spirit dust or sub non spirit dust, and then I'm a carcass. Human material. Mere human. That, though, the idea of a post-disembodied soul going to hell would actually be going to God the Father, the Moses. Moses has horns. Halos were once held up by horns, supposedly, in certain art histories. And then the Mandela effect says, Moses never had horns. What's going on? But it did even before the supposed Mandela effect started, even before his first death. Anyway, what to say? Oh, yeah, just compounding, reorganizing symbol sets, and placations, bad discernment. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, just let me read these. I'm going to stop. Oh, sun. Oh, yeah, so then after you die for 3 days, you get to go visit Father in the sun. That's what burning is, right? That's what it's about. And then after 3 days, you can come back and you'll get your body back and you'll have some wounds of how you died, and you can let Thomas go play with them with his finger. Like, oh my God. What is that goop? Something like that. Right. Anyway, ouch. I plugged you in the home base Discord channel, The Real Politics. Oh, The Real Politics. Oh, yeah. Well, I guess another thing to say is this doesn't leave me, even though certain spiritual heights left me in non-considerable form of other human entities as humans, meaning I had got to the point of denying everything. There was a regrounding, and human organisms ended up playing a very true and real role, even though certain relationships appear to be more like screwing pornographic robots. They're just wild and crazy and tattooed and off the fucking hook. And what am I doing with this thing? Anyway, at least she can sing. I guess she's got the singing thing. Moonwalkers, this, that. Paddywhack, give a dog a bone. Let me. Oh yeah, just the idea of walking a dog. Okay, why you give a kid a dog? I think in Islam they're considered the hound of hell, and in China they're just like, hey, let's just cook it. It's our pet. Let's eat it. But, hey, we like dogs because they're God in reverse, and we like to walk around with our God, which is like the evil mirror of something or another. Blah 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 blah. Let's give it 3 heads and call it Cerebus. Anyway, I guess I'll just meow 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 the rest of my way out of this little concord of verbiage. Leave you guys in a bit of a puddle, and that's how I'll begin my day. I think I'm off to make coffee. Mine is pre-ground, so I don't have to suffer the industrial sound. Peace until the next person coming in to park in my lot squeals on their brakes. Amen. By the way, a lot of people have a lot of weight on their being, and a lot of people, I don't mind playing with it. I don't even mind other people throwing it around like it's nothing, but it doesn't mean that it is nothing. And so certain people should not take everything so lightly. I guess sometimes, I don't know. It's weird. Like, I don't want to pull apart a Lego building or an erector set when there's still ladybugs playing on it. You know what I mean? Like, get the ladybugs off, or get the other organisms off of it before you defound it. But sometimes it's like I wonder whether or not defoundational logics are like the soul moving into a type of self-explosion, and whether or not that's remediated. Remediated? Is that the word I want to use? To remediate? Remediable? Meaning whether or not there's an inverse, not an inverse opposite, but just an inverse of the outbound. Meaning I can disassemble the Legos and take the bugs and ladybugs off of it, and then I can rebuild it and let the bugs and ladybugs reclimb it. But then when it comes to social affairs, where you can't just go pull apart a government building because you have a common interest in that building, not to be scaled with my current HOA problem. It just makes me wonder what's moral and what's ethical. And anyway, all of that being said, yeah, a lot of people are coming from a lot of fucked up backgrounds, and so I think it's fun to get to know people, and then I think it's fun to fuck around a little bit with people. In one way, there's a bit of a certain bit of, like, it's like a justification for harassment is almost like a, hey, I want to know more about you. I just, I don't want to require you to answer, but while you're here, if you're hanging out in my little tea party, if you're watching my little video, maybe I get a pick at you a little bit just for fun, right? Like, there's other people that have had deaths in the family, and the components of the relational aspects that are going on around that death, and even to the person that that's most connected to the death or deaths, the series of deaths, the way they handle consideration about that is interesting. And I noticed a lot of people that are around several deaths, they almost in a way become narcissistic about their own life, to the point where they are wanting to straighten themselves out so badly that they forget to consider the current remainder of relationships, and those relationships robust. I love the word robust. The vastness of the inner worlds of others that are not potentially unlike your own. Amen, namaste, and thanks for your time, ladies and gentlemen. We'll catch you on the flip flop this time of day whenever I get around to recording, because that's how I do it. Ouch and ow. And it's sorry, and it's cool, and I mean all this from the bottom of what might be remaining of my heart. Do I even have one? I'm not even certain there's blood in this alien body anymore. Peace. Nanu nanu. Out.